Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This next session, well, I'm Melissa Coakley, and I'm introducing the next session, which we have with Tracie Cantu, who's going to be speaking to us about pay equity and transparency for women in L&D, which is so important. I know a topic that everyone is discussing that's near and dear to all of our hearts. It affects everyone. So we're really excited about this one. So a little bit about Tracie before I pass the mic. Tracie Cantu is a recognized leader in learning operations and technology with over 2 decades of experience transforming enterprise L&D functions at companies like Meta, Atlassian, and Whole Foods Market. As Chief Learning Strategist at Your Chief Learning Officer, she helps organizations modernize learning operations, optimize technology ecosystems, and implement scalable processes that drive measurable business impact. Known for her strategic approach to automation, governance, and learning technology, Tracie enables L&D teams to improve efficiency, scale impact, and drive business results without adding headcount. So excited to hear what you have to say about this, Tracie. Thanks for coming.
Absolutely. Thank you all for having me. And luckily, that means I don't have to talk about myself, so I can skip right into the good stuff. Um, Love to hear where everybody's dialing in from today. Definitely, it plays a good part. I will say a lot of this is US based. So that's where I get a lot of my data and my resources from. So if there's anyone international who has some questions, I will gladly follow up on those and get you local information. Um, to kick us off, though, I would like to say, like, we got some ground rules here. Um, this is about having clarity, having facts. It's not about blame. It's about transparency, awareness, and growth. Like, if there's any point where we're going through here and you're like, I didn't know that, that's absolutely fine because a lot of pay laws, transparency, pay equity, market compensation data is not necessarily easy to find, and it's for a reason. And that's why we're here today. And I'll try as much as possible to ground this in data, not just our opinions, even though I do have really strong opinions on this topic. Um, my goal is that you can leave here with some language, some tools, some action steps, not just inspiration. Um, at its core, what is pay equity? It means being compensated fairly for the work you do. Your identity factors are nothing. You could be a Martian. You could be a Klingon. You could be anything. I'm going to keep it in sci fi when I start doing identity politics because I don't, that's another presentation. We can do it at another time. But it's about being compensated fairly no matter what you identify as. It's not just about equal pay for the exact same job. It's about ensuring people doing work of equal value are paid equitably. Roles have a lot of complexity, a lot of responsibility, and their contributions to the business vary. So it's really important that we are comparing apples to apples as much as possible. So why are we talking about it? Let's do some of the numbers here. Let me click in. L&D is a field dominated by women, but nearly, what was it? The training industry report found that women hold nearly 70% of L&D roles, but it is disproportionately at lower levels. Meanwhile, senior leadership is still male dominated. So look at these numbers. If 67% of entry level individual contributor roles are female, that number flips to 69% male dominated in the senior level leaders. This isn't just a representation issue, it's a pay issue. Leadership roles come with decision making power, visibility, and higher compensation. When few of us get these opportunities, the compensation gap widens. I also want to take a minute here to say if you have any questions, anything that you're like, hey, can you talk a little more on that? Pop it in chat. Melissa is keeping an eye on it for me, and we'll bring it up as we go through. So, even in a female majority function like ours, pay inequities persist. It it seems counterintuitive, but the research shows it's true. Gender dominated fields often pay less overall. Think of teachers, nurses, administrative assistants. A lot of those fields are considered gender dominated by women and therefore have been underpaid compared to their male peers. And L&D, like I said, is no exception. We also find that leadership representation and compensation are intertwined. When we're not at the top, we're also not setting the standard for what our work is worth. One of the things that I think of is this will begin to compound as we go through. Women in their 20s making an average of less than 6%, less than their male counterparts, that will compound exponentially as a person goes through their career. And it goes without saying that, well, it doesn't go without saying, I will say it. All of these numbers are the aggregate of all people who identify as women. If you actually pull out the numbers for women of color and trans women and LGBTQ women, the percentages, the gaps widen massively. Like they are inflated because it is an aggregate of all women. But as you start to get into individual groups, you will see the gaps widen once you get outside of white women. And just so you know, there is something called the broken rung. And this is a big deal for me because I think this is really where the pay gap is reinforced and then it widens to like Grand Canyon level uh, propensity. So, what is the broken rung? Research from McKinsey and Lean In describe it as that first step on the career ladder. Women are less likely to get promoted to their first leadership role than men. That's insane. And you can see it has not gotten better. 79 women for every 100 men promoted in 2018. We got two more per 100 men in 2024, but that's still not enough because if we don't get that first promotion, we can't climb the rest of the ladder. And if we can't climb the rest of the ladder, there's tons of consequences. One of the consequences I think of is that we lack women in senior leadership roles to sponsor and mentor the next generation of female leaders. So the less representation we have above, the less opportunity we have to lend our hand down and pull the next generation up. And that just really starts us behind the eight ball. Like it keeps us there. Our lower salaries early in our career compound over time. They start impacting our raises, our bonus, even our retirement savings. I'm going to ask in chat, for those of you who have been a mother, have friends who are mothers, just, no mothers. If a woman takes maternity leave, how far does she put her career back on average? How long do you all think that it puts her career behind on average? And not just because she took 12 weeks, 6 months, the first year, not just that time. Melissa says years. See, 3 years, 10 years, 5 years, 5 years. Y'all, it's 3 years per child. Gabby was right on that one. 3 years per child, you set yourself back. And that is a horrible statement to even have to make. Like we have just delayed our career growth, our compensation potential by 3 years because we chose to have a child. Those two facts shouldn't exist. It just shouldn't. And women, once you have a child, it does lessen your ability to be promoted. And I know it's illegal. It's 1,000% illegal, but unconscious bias really does play into people's decisions. It's really hard. I was talking with a recruiting friend of mine, and they were talking about how they're trying to train recruiters and hiring managers to focus on comparing the answers to the questions versus comparing the people. Because people are so individual and so different that it's very easy to get unconscious bias in. But when you compare the responses to your questions, it is so much easier to make an apples to apples comparison. And that's really what we are missing in this broken rung, because they are comparing persons and persons' potential to leave, potential to have caregiving issues, all of that versus actually our capabilities. I want to do some math here because I want to show, like, say we start 6% under. We all started Acme at 60,000. We're now in year one. Most places average about a 2% annual increase merit wise on average. So in year one, you see you're at 61,200. It's not until year 8 that you would make it up to 70,300. Your peer, your male peer, 2, 3, 4, started at year 4 salary compared to you. And you can see how that would compound and how much quicker they would get to 70,000 than you with that 6% backed in. And even with, if you started at the same underpaid salary and you switch company roles every 2 to 3 years, you stayed the same role, but you switch companies, you'll get into the 70,000s quicker, but you're still making less than your male peers. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important for us to talk about pay equity and pay transparency. So the evidence shows transparency works. Flat out, it does. When pay information is visible and understandable, organizations do see smaller gender pay gaps, better employee morale, and stronger retention. People stay because they not only believe they're being paid fairly, but they know they're being paid fairly. They're more engaged and they trust their leadership. Have any of you ever had a case where you've had to talk to your leader because maybe they were hiring another person on the team who had the same role as you did, and you saw their pay salary being in the posting and it was drastically different than yours? How did that make you feel if it happened to you? Looking at you, chat. Now I really do sound like my teenage kids. Yeah, Melissa, I bet it's not great. It's a rough thing to happen. Yeah, government workers, all government salaries are public information, and it's terrible. It's a terrible feeling. Another thing transparency reduces is the burden all of us have on becoming expert negotiators. You know, why do we have to bear the burden of the 100% of the fight? Why can't this be something that we collaborate with employers with to get better treatment, better pay, equitable pay for equal work? Looking at Shelly's. Good for you, Shelly. Shelly just brought up about a promo and found out what somebody's pay bump was and then went in and asked for that raise and got it. That's awesome. Something that I think that we need to also think about is this isn't just about ethics. It's for the company, it's about operational excellence. If you have a transparent compensation system, it's easier to defend, it's easier to scale, and it's less likely to backfire. I know immediately if I'm going to apply for this internal role because it could be a lateral that pays within the same salary band as I currently have. Could be a promotion that pays above that salary band. Or I've been in spots where when you switch divisions from like IT over to HR, the pay band actually goes down even though it's a lateral move. that's great because salary transparency, I knew that wasn't a role for me because I didn't want to take a pay cut to take a different role at that time. But I wouldn't have known that if they hadn't published those salaries. So I want this one always annoys the living daylights out of me. Um, it is not illegal to talk about your pay. I don't care what's in your employee handbook at all. Like, I literally was at a company long time ago. The one of the VPs came in and said, "Hey, we need to write up so and so at one of our store locations because they were talking about their pay. They shared it with another supervisor." And I was like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, we have to write them up. They're not allowed to talk about their pay." And I'm like, "Yeah, actually they are. The National Labor Relations Act allows people to talk about their pay." So I know it is different in foreign countries. And if anybody wants, I'm glad to look it up, try to find out for you. But in the US, it is not illegal. So we need to challenge those harmful norms. Talking about money is not inappropriate. It's not emotional or it's not divisive. And I know for a lot of women, we are socialized to be quiet, polite, modest, non confrontational, not to rock the boat. Bullshit. We deserve to earn for our work, plain and simple, nothing else. And the more we protect secrecy, the more we enforce inequality. If we avoid these conversations, we make it easier for everybody not to know that everybody in our group is being underpaid and overworked. So we need to share. We need to find ways to talk about it that are comfortable for all involved. And I don't mean like go into your break room and be like, "I make $102,000 a year." Like, please, like you will be remembered forever in company culture if you pull that one. It also means we don't have to have these huge spreadsheets where we're all anonymously adding stuff. But you can go to your HR team and be like, "Do we have publicly available compensation bands for, like, maybe I'm an individual contributor 6 for IC6s in HR?" "Oh, okay, thank you." And you can look at them then. "Can I see what the IC7 is in case I'm trying to get a promotion?" A lot of times HR is willing to do that. You can also, if you got a work bestie, you can start talking about this. Like, what was your bonus? Like, what was your percentage that you got this year? What was your merit percentage this year? What's your base pay? Um, and maybe even start talking as a team, like, what's our compensation philosophy? Like, we don't have to be confrontational about it. We can come at it with curiosity, open mindedness, confidence. Like, ask your manager, how are salaries structured here? Look at your work bestie and go, what do you think's a fair range for this job? Like, for this role? You have to be brave enough to compare notes, even though it's going to be a really awkward conversation when you first start them. I really want to reinforce that transparency in pay is professionalism, because this is legitimately an example of a rising tide raises all boats. One thing I do for folks, and I coach them to try this the first few times, if talking about pay is awkward for you, say you're an instructional designer making $65,000 a year. There are a couple other instructional designers on your team. Go up to them and go, "I have a question for you. Do you make over or under 70,000 a year?" And see what they answer. You're not asking for their exact salary. You're not. And if they're like under, you could be like, "Me too." And then maybe that leads to a further conversation. If they say over, there's kind of ways where how they'll say over that gives you some inclination of how far over. Because you're like, "Do you make over or under 70,000?" If they go over, they're making significantly more than 70,000. And that leads to another conversation that you can have. But it's one of those things that I find that over or under conversation is a really good bridge for people who feel awkward asking and for people who feel it's a bit awkward and is it a privacy issue or whatnot answering. It gives you some space to still not give an exact number while you get comfortable having the conversation. What are your thoughts on the over under conversation? Is that something you all can see yourself using? Something else I want to talk about is our new laws and our new standards. It's such good news that pay transparency is starting to be codified throughout many states and many cities. It helps us so much. States are passing laws that require salary ranges and job postings. And I know there are some companies who are jerks and are like, this job pays from 90,000 to 350,000. I was joking with Melissa earlier. I'm like, that's not a salary range. That's three different positions because the roles and responsibilities I would take in the 300s are very different than what I would take at 90,000. So I get that happens. But like, if you're in California, New York, Colorado, they're supposed to post their salary data even before the interview. It's supposed to be in the job description. What that means is you can start actually using it to research your area. Like, am I being paid what the market is willing to pay for these roles? It helps us level the playing field, gives us a clear starting point, and it helps reduce the risk of anchoring too low. I can't tell you how many times they ask you, like, so what's your salary range for this position? And you're like, if I give them a number and I don't know their pay range, I might be like undercutting myself. But if I give too high of a number, I might be knocking myself out. I personally don't give them my range. I have used different tactics where in the past, I'll be like, oh, I was recently working for a locally owned retailer. And I did it for the opportunity of the role that I was in, not for the pay. They know their pay scale is lower than market value. So I really don't want to talk about that. I'd love to hear what your range is. Kind of reframing it. When I came from big tech and was moving out of big tech, I would get the interview and they'd be like, so what's your salary range? Like, where are you sitting right now? And I would always say, look, I came from big tech. I know their salary ranges are inflated at this time. So I don't want to scare you away on this conversation. So I'd love to hear where you're at because I'm looking more at this like an opportunity versus time to really inflate and increase my salary. There are ways to navigate that where you can deflect the recruiter from going on. If they're really pushy, it starts to tell you a bit about the culture. So just a thought on that one. And I wanted to share these because these are the current states that have to do salary range and job postings. Jersey and Vermont go in June and July of this summer. So they're coming through. And then this one I didn't even realize, like Connecticut, Maryland, Nevada, they're upon request after a job interview, and Toledo, Ohio is that way too. Just there. But something that you can do with these, if you're shopping to see like one, shopping for roles, or two, shopping to see if your salary is within the right range in your area. Anything on the coast, when people do market compensation, are usually aligned. A New York City area will make the same as an LA or a Seattle area. So just define the coast as the highest salary bands. Then you get in the Austins, the Atlantas, the Chicagos. Those are going to be like your second tier level of salary bands. And then the rest of the nation hits about the third tier level. Like you can kind of judge it that way. So if I was looking through these states, like, yeah, California, Hawaii, bless their hearts, their pay range is going to be insane. California, Colorado, Mass, New York, Washington, they would all have higher than usual pay scales compared to the rest of the country. Minnesota would be a really good middle of the road gauge. Illinois would be as well outside of Chicago, because Chicago is a bit of a higher tier one. And Vermont's going to be a little bit hit or miss. There is a very higher level, high cost of living in Vermont that's constantly growing. So I think that's a state that is in transition as more and more people take on Vermont as a recreational area. So use Vermont with a grain of salt. I would right now put it in that second tier payroll level. Liz, I will get to that in just a second. But I just wanted to say, too, another thing you can use these salary ranges for is you see these posted. You can then go to your boss and be like, hey, I was looking in the Chicago area. Everybody who's a senior instructional designer is making between 75 and 105,000. And I'm at the bottom of that range, and I've been here 8 years. Can you help me understand how the salary range was determined here? Like, what was it? Because sometimes market compensation evaluations haven't been done in eons, and it might be time. But it also could just be a good start where you better understand the company's economics, because a nonprofit, a government agency, they are going to pay a little less because they're going off of grants and taxpayer money versus a startup or a big tech company or a pharma company has much deeper bank accounts. Liz, on salary freezes and transparency, ask. I would just straight up ask. One of the things in the past, when they're like, we're putting up a hiring freeze, we're not doing merit raises this year. Okay, understood. What departments are impacted? I think that's a little easier to ask what departments are impacted versus what roles are impacted, because they're more willing to tell you finance, IT, operations, and HR. It makes them feel like they're not IDing people at an individual level. Navigating salary negotiations during a salary freeze. This one, I would say, really depends on the criticality of your role. Are you a single dependency? Are you the one person who does everything and is the only one who knows how to do it? And are you a flight risk? I have been a leader who have had people on my team who were in critical roles, and I have gone to my leaders during salary freezes and been like, because this person is a flight risk, and if we lose them, we would have to hire 20,000 higher off the street. I would like to advocate for an $8,000 pay bump a year. So that way we do not have attrition, but we are still saving money because we didn't hire off the street. And you kind of make that business case. And that is a really good one to compare, because we all know they gave us 3 raises over 3 years and we're now at like 63, 64,000. But if they hired off the street, they'd probably be paying at 72, 75. So you can kind of compare of like, yes, you're increasing their salary, but you're saving X amount of dollars because we're avoiding having to hire from the street. Okay. Advocating for pay equity. This one is, I feel like for L&D as a whole, we're people. We want to make people better. We want to help. We want to make sure they're enjoying their experience, that they're getting the full value out of it. But one of the things that we're not necessarily good on is saying anybody who completes this training at 60% or higher reduces turnover by 27% for that role. The ROI statement. And it comes back to these salary negotiations too. But something that I think I really need to state, and I hate that I have to state it, but I'm going to, is your worth as a person is not up for negotiation. And a statement. Your pay, your role has nothing to do with your worth as a human being. Your value is priceless for that. So take a deep breath, meditate a bit on that, and just know that though compensation feels personal, it's not. It's personal to your budget, but it's not personal to your worth. So please remember that. Um, Now, getting back to your compensation should be based on your market value and your business impact. Your market value is what roles like yours pay in your industry, your geography, and company size. That's all driven by external benchmarks. And there's not an HR person in payroll worth their salt who doesn't know how to do a market compensation or at least know how to go to a vendor to buy one. Just a hint, if you have a SHRM membership, you actually can buy market compensation data, but I'll show you a place where you can get some free market compensation data a little bit later. For your value, that's what you bring to the table. That includes results, outcomes, the problems you solved. And it's not the level of effort, it's not the number of completions, the number of how happy the learner was for it, it's the effect, the impact. You did a training that led to an increase of, like, you just put out a whole sales enablement training on these 3 new product lines that your company is putting out. Everybody who took your training increased their closing rate by 4%. Holy crap, that's a lot of money you just made for the company. And I bet you could walk over to the finance data analyst, because they love to talk their numbers, and go, hey, based off of this stat that everybody increased by 4%, what would that average revenue look like? And they'd be like, hold on. And they can get you that. And you can be like, which earned the company an additional $2 million this quarter. That's impact. That's a statement. That's really something to drive a, like, I need a raise conversation. So when we advocate for ourselves on this, we don't say, I work hard. I'm the hardest working person on the team. I do a lot. I take care of a lot of things. I manage all of this stuff. We go back to factual statements. I led a project that cut time to proficiency for onboarding by 30%. Okay, wow. I wouldn't use course completions. I would go back to, I built a sales enablement training that is proven that if they complete it, increases their closure rate by 3%, gaining the company an average of $2 million a quarter. If you know your value, you then speak to it clearly and competently. That's how you get your leadership's attention. Water break. Any questions so far? It's so weird not seeing people. So used to presenting like in person. I love webinars because I get to do this from my lovely office, but I miss seeing everybody's faces.
There was a
Right.
question. Oh, I just hit the chat by accident.
Yeah.
Sorry. But there was a question about how to address this type of conversation when there's like a hiring freeze or a salary freeze, or like if there are any specific techniques.
We did get to that one. Yeah, I was able to cover that a little bit ago. So yeah. By anybody
And
else?
how would you this is great advice, and how would you translate that into, I'm asking because I'm self-employed, I know a lot of people contract. If you're a contractor, what does this look like? Because you're not necessarily negotiating a whole salary, but
Okay.
what
Let me
advice?
cover the next 2 slides, and then I'll bring that one back because this will help you do the math for that and start calculating.
Great.
Right. Let's talk researching market rates. I'm a nerd. I love researching, and this is one of the things I love because this is what helps me every time I go into like any type of compensation conversation. Like, I want to calibrate what the market is currently paying, where my actual role is, and how that fits into this conversation. So, firm believer, you can't negotiate if you don't know what is a reasonable ask. Like you lose your power immediately if you don't know how the deck is stacked. So you can start researching by yourself through self-reported compensation databases like Glassdoor, PayScale, levels.fyi if you're in tech. They do a lot of stuff, and a lot of program management and product management too. L&D specific salary surveys. can be done through ATD and the Learning Guild. They've had some. One thing I want to caution though is there is so much variety in job titles, especially in L&D, that you need to really look at the role and the scope of the role, not just the title. Because you might have the same title, but what they're asking for may be substantially different. You may actually find out that on your small but mighty team of 3, you're actually doing the same scope and responsibilities as a manager, but you're an individual contributor. But your duties actually put you in a manager bucket, and that should be where you're starting to negotiate pay from. Also, don't underestimate your network. If you've got folks that you've met at conferences, that you've just built strong relationships with, if it's in your local ATD chapters, in TLDC Slack channels, and wherever you go to network with your peers, start having these conversations. Like, what are you seeing in the market for this role? Like, how is pay going? Like, are you seeing it going up? Is it stagnating? Is it going down? What's happening around here? Because we kind of get blinders on in our own organization. And if we're just moving job to job and staying roughly around the same salary range, that enforces the blinders. So I want to say knowledge doesn't make you entitled, it makes you empowered. And you may see some leaders flinch back when you start actually quoting dollar amounts because the conversation is awkward for a lot of people. For some reason, I go back to the beginning, we have a taboo about talking about money. And if you have male leaders and male presenting leaders, there is the taboo around like the angry woman. Like, why are you being demanding? Why are you being shrill? I hate being like that, but it's true. Like, I'm a brash woman. I know it. But I would be a go-getter. I would be an innovator if I was male. But some of my other performance reviews in the past have been like pushy, bossy. And we don't want to come across that way, but we need to, because nobody's going to be bossy for us. Nobody's going to be pushy for us. So if you're going to give me those words, I'm going to earn those words, and we're going to do it. So ignore the awkwardness. Now, free is one of my favorite things. And the BLS.gov is an amazing free resource for payroll reported wages. So all of the other stuff is self-disclosed. I find that some people don't know the difference between base salary and total compensation. So I use those much more as a very large ballpark figure versus an actual specific range. But the BLS.gov gets their data from payroll data across the country. Now, the beautiful thing about this is you can break it down like by percentiles. You can go into geographic areas, see what the wages are for the area. Now, I'm going to peek on my screen here. So the average wage in 2024 for a training and development manager is $138,450. It's very close to the median as well. I believe the median's about 142. The median gives us a better indicator because an average can be skewed by very high numbers or by very low numbers, but a median is pretty right on. And then the training specialist, the average in the United States last year was 71,000. This is payroll data. This is very easy to go into, break it down. You can download the Excel file and say, look, boss, I was looking at this based off of our region, based off of my role. I'm a training and development specialist. I'm being paid in the 10th percentile for this area, for this market. How can we start to get me up to market standard? It's a great place to have that conversation. Now, to go back to Melissa's question about you're a consultant, how do you ask for money? One, I'm going to tell you this is the hardest part if you're early on. Don't bill hourly, bill by value. What problem are you solving? What are you saving them long term? I'll go back to that sales enablement exercise. If they made 2 million a quarter off of my 40 hours worth of work and I only charged $100 an hour, I'm doing simple math because I was a history major for a reason. So I made like $4,000 off of something they made 2 million of a quarter. I didn't charge for my value. I just charged for my time. Um, so start having that conversation with yourself because that is a money mindset kind of conversation. But if you're still like, no, my clientele wants an hourly thing, go to BLS. Go in and be like, all right. So people make on average 70,000 for an instructional designer. That's what I'm generically going to call a training and development specialist. But then you're a little like, but I also project manage this as well. Those folks make about 104. So you get, I'm going to do this on the fly. So I'm going to need my calculator here. 80,000. So it's about, let's say $40 an hour. Taxes are going to cost you about 50. So at minimum, you should be charging $80 an hour if that's what your geographic area says. Like that should be your baseline kind of conversation when you go through, because if you're working on a 1099, you pay your own taxes. So calculate that in. So if you were on a W-2, you'd maybe be making $40 an hour. If they're paying you on a W-2, $40 an hour. Okay. If they're paying you on a 1099 and you're responsible for taxes, calculate in what your tax rate would be. I always just round up to 50% just as a cushion because I don't want to like mess with the IRS. Ooh, how do professional certs bump up salary in terms of your value? A lot. Uh, I think it's up to you, Shelley, to determine what your plus percentage should be. I'm an instructional designer who also does project management. I'm going to be on a 1099. I would normally charge like my flat rate is $80. I'm going to charge a 20% surcharge for my thing. So I'm going to add X number of dollars on top of that. So that would be your rate. And honestly, I would look at these every year to recalculate your rate and constantly be recalculating that rate because the cost of goods from 2020 to 2025 have gone up like 22%. Your wages over that time, if you're working 9 to 5, probably have not. But if you are a consultant, you have the freedom to set your wages and you can start edging them up to like to meet that gap too. Like you should be constantly reevaluating and making sure that they're being adjusted for inflation and market value and demand. Did that help answer your question, Shelley? So I'm going to go back to the slide of pay over 8 years. We just saw that the average training specialist in the United States was 71,980. We all started at 60,000 at Acme. What the heck? That's a conversation that when we were being hired, we could have been like, for the Chicago area, based off of the employment data that the BLS has, the average salary is 71,000. So when they ask you like, what are you looking for in terms of salary? You could be like, between 72 and 75. You could just start it straight out like that based off of your conversation, your research that you've done. Just because their range says like 60 to 80 doesn't mean you start at 60. They'd like to have you start at 60. I mean, if you were running the business, you want to optimize your budget as best as possible. I think underpaying people is not right. Like lowballing people is unethical, in my opinion. I hate doing it. I like getting people right in the middle to give them room for growth. so they're not topped out immediately, because people who are topped out immediately get very grumpy when they stop getting merit raises in like year 2. So I do take that into account when I hire. But yeah, I don't believe in lowballing, and having that kind of research helps you know how to not get lowballed. So I really want you all to think about that. All right. Now, tips and tricks. This QR code will be at the end too, but I put together a little compensation conversation aid that you can download for free and just take your notes, do what you need to on it, and prep you for the next pay cycle that you're going through, the next job interview you're going to, the next proposal you submit to a client, go through. So the more you prepare, the less intimidating a negotiation feels. Literally, if you have teenagers in your life anywhere, cousins, nieces, nephews, aunt, like you're an auntie to somebody or they're your own, they're the most argumentative people ever. Tell them they're supposed to argue against you getting this raise. You will get really comfortable with negotiating using a teenager. But some other tips that really like help work here is, based on my research, the range for this role is typically X to Y. And if they go like, what? Be like, where'd you get your research? Be like, the Bureau of Labor Statistics is currently up to 2023 on payroll. So in 2023, this was 70,000. That was the average. That information is 2 years out of date, so I'm sure it's gone up, but I would like to ask around the 74,000. Oh, it's still a thank you, I'll fix that. You know what? We're going to cheat. Here's the direct link. So be prepared for that pushback. Like I said, it helps once again if you've got a friend who plays a really good devil's advocate or a teenager handy, because practice your ask, rehearse it until it's so natural and so secondhand. You're used to all of the objections, contradictions, runabouts, all of that. And then I ask that you stay open-minded and stay curious. Because if they're like, no, this is all we can offer, ask, why is the offer at this level? And they might be like, based off of our salary bands, this is actually in the middle range. And this is where we're at right now. And to keep pay equity amongst everybody we employ, we really don't go outside of it. I've got a lot of respect for somebody, an employer, who tells me that. So you want to make sure you hear that, you know their why. Also, too, this might be a time where you go, okay, I understand that, but would it be possible to negotiate a signing bonus? Or could I negotiate some additional PTO? Like, instead of having to wait 3 months, that I just start immediately with 2 weeks of PTO? Like, there are other ways to get creative based off of what's important to you and where you're at in life. So if all that doesn't work and you're still like, nope, this is not going to meet my needs, just tell them, like, thanks for the offer. I love this role, but based off of my experience and what the market is willing to pay for that, I was expecting something closer to XYZ, and it doesn't look like we're going to get there. I actually had a conversation with a recruiter with that, and I was like, this role is amazing. Your organization is amazing. I'm not currently in the market looking for another role, so I'm not interested in negotiating, but I want you to know that people actually usually make about 50,000 more than what you're offering in this role. And the recruiter was like, seriously? And I'm like, yes. And it was a big eye opener. And I would say, like, within 3 weeks, I saw the compensation range on that change. So you never know who you may be doing another woman and another place a favor. So speak up. So advocating for equity. Don't let it be intimidating. Make sure that we're transparent. Have those conversations no matter how awkward they are. If you want to keep them generic, use the over-under conversation starter. Helps out a lot, makes people feel a little more comfortable. It's great to do whether you're at networking events or with your work besties. Realize that just because you're a training specialist and the other person may be a training supervisor, you may have the same scope of work. Don't trust the job titles because they're so varied. Really make sure that you're looking at the scope of work when you try to figure out, am I being paid equally for this role? Know where to find your salary data, know how to advocate for yourself, share resources. When you find something, tell the people in your life, in your sphere of influence, like, hey, did you realize I didn't know that in St. Louis, the average pay for an instructional designer is 80,000. Yeah, my friend works over at such and they do market compensation and they published it broadly and she told me. So I'm telling you. And then you set the bar higher for everyone. And also too, this is my rule for life. You don't need to be in charge to ask questions and to expect good answers. So don't be afraid to ask. It's not illegal to talk about pay. I know people will get very antsy about it, but it's not. And there's always nice ways to frame it. Like, our salary ranges built here. How do we determine like what we offer a person? Like, oh, it's based on experience. Do we have a matrix that we use to calculate it? And if your leader looks at you and goes, go talk to HR. Like, there's somebody there who knows, and they could just be like, no, it's up to each leader. Or, oh, yeah, we do. Here it is. And you can judge by that. But that's really what we want to make sure that we're doing is asking good questions, validating and critically looking at the data we see about compensation, and then sharing with other women. So that way we all know when we go into the next raise conversation, promotion conversation, just general job offer, or putting in a proposal for a contract bid, where the market stands based off of our value and what we should feel confident in asking. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you for letting me know that was still in preview. But I did put the link in the conversation so you can grab it there. Any last minute questions? Anything you got?
I do have a question that was in the little question panel that I missed earlier. So sorry for that, Mary Phillips. And she had a really interesting question that I have the same question. How do you determine which state info to use when you work remotely in a different state from where your company is based?
That is really interesting because I'm going to use the tale of two tech companies because I worked for them and they both had different approaches to this. Atlassian, and they allowed us all to work remote, had 3 different tiers. Coasts, then there were the big intermediate cities like the Austins, Houstons, Atlantas, Dallas, Chicago's, and then everything else.
Oh, wow.
So there's just 3 tiers that they grouped in together, and they reevaluated them every 2 years. And they did this internationally too. Like, if you work in this portion of Europe, it's this portion, and so on. Meta did it city by city, but they had the engineering infrastructure to build the algorithm to analyze that, and the HR team to do it as well.
Yeah.
So you would literally it was a form. You go in and be like, I am moving to Columbus, Ohio from Austin, Texas. And it would be like, you will take a $2,483.13 pay cut a year. You're like, well, what? And then you'd surprisingly be like, I would like to move to Sacramento, and be like, you would be getting a $12,000 pay increase. And you're like, what? Like, I didn't think Sacramento was that expensive. Like, you'd have these moments. They did vary it based off of big tech is overinflated. I will say that. Like, they really value the coasts and the Ivy League schools they produce. So there is bias inherent in that system. But I really do feel like thinking in general levels of tiers, like big coastal cities, because the coasts are expensive, big middle tier cities, and then the rest of America kind of makes sense. Jaleesa, I would say Pittsburgh would be like the rest of America. The Rust Belt, in my opinion, is an undervalued area. It's one of the places where we all know that we could probably still get, if we don't live there currently, where we could get property. Like everybody who's outpriced in the coasts and in Texas could probably like, I'll move to Detroit, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, all that area, and it's absolutely fantastic. I think it's undervalued. I think it's going to come to fruition, but right now it's probably like, along with St. Louis, the rest of the country kind of pay scale in Kansas City. So what else? All right. Well, that is my time, and I thank you all so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Tracie. This was so interesting. And I love that there are like actionable things that we can do. I love that you gave us a little present with the conversation aid. That's always nice to have. So thank you so much. Really interesting session. Useful immediately.
I appreciate it. I'm glad you all are here, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and follow up as needed.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.